So Grixis Dragon seems to be getting really popular in Arena. And while I think the deck is awesome, I also think people are missing out on some really great dragon synergy in Standard, and you don't even need to deal with mana fixing. Today I present to you Mono Red Dragons in Standard. It's ridiculous how combo-y and fun this deck can be. I'm still discovering new combos in the deck. Your opponents are never going to know what to expect. So let's go through the deck list. You're going to find that it's also a pretty cheap deck, or there's some cheap substitutes you could always throw in. The only exception to that is going to be our boy Sarkhan. He's getting up there in price, I believe, and there's really no substitute for what he does in the deck. He's really what drives this deck forward. Now, the number of copies is flexible, just depends on the budget if you're doing this in paper. I'd run 3 to 4 in Arena. Gives you that consistency, and because Sarkhan gives you the ability to discard any extra copies, you aren't going to have any dead cards in hand. Next up is Lathliss. This is going to be the finisher. You're getting double the value for your dragons, and you're going to be able to dump all of your mana into fire breathing. That alone can get really out of hand, especially if you have a well-established board state. Even life gain decks are just not going to be able to keep up if you've generated enough 5/5s off of Lathliss, and those could be 10/5s by the time that you've dumped your mana into Lathliss's ability. I'm running 2 copies of Lathliss because the legend rule and the high CMC, and just the fact that the deck doesn't really depend on her to win. She's definitely nice to have around, and with Sarkhan you could get her out turn 4, but there's no need to fear an Ixalan's Binding or anything like that. There's plenty of ways to get big dragons out on the field without her. I'm also running 2 of Verix Bladewing. This is going to be a cheap, quick dragon if you can't control your opponent's board state, but late game this is going to synergize really well with Lathliss. A kicked Verix with Lathliss on the battlefield is going to give you 3 dragons coming out at once. And again, if Sarkhan is giving you that ramp, it's entirely possible to do that by turn 5, giving you turn 6 to swing in with your 4 dragons. That's going to force your opponents to have a Settle the Wreckage, some kind of fog, or have enough flyers to block. Now, to give a silver lining to Settle the Wreckage, as well as trigger some of our dragon-dependent cards, we're going to run a playset of Dragon Egg. When I get into some of the non-creature spells, you'll see why a cheap dragon is key, and in addition to that, we're either going to prevent our opponents from swinging in if they're smart, or if they swing in, they're going to give you a dangerous weapon in the air. I've won games where my opponent didn't pay attention to the fire-breathing ability of the token, and I either got them to trade their biggest creature, or I ended up swinging in for lethal to end the game. So if your opponent does want to give you the lands with a Settle the Wreckage or Assassin's Trophy, you could benefit from that long term with the dragon token from Dragon Egg. 2 copies of Demanding Dragon to get in some damage for the non-creature decks. If they do have any creatures out, an Enigma Drake, a Bolus, we're going to have that larger body to block with. The perk here is that we have a big non-legendary dragon, so although I'm only running 2 for the deck, that can be flexible if you're trying to get more large bodies out on the field. And if we are going against some creature-heavy decks like a Merfolk or Tokens build, where that 1 sacrifice doesn't really hurt our opponent's board state, we're going to run 2 of the Hellkite Whelps, which I think is pretty underrated. I don't think I've seen anybody else playing it. I know it's a little weak to removal, but the 1 damage when it attacks could give you that extra boost for a burn spell, or it could keep your opponent's token count to a minimum. With Convoke being a pretty relevant mechanic, I think it's really important to keep those tokens down, because sometimes that can translate to land destruction against your opponent, and we're going to do that against Golgari as well and take out some Llanowar Elves. Last of our creatures is Runaway Steam-Kin. When I originally built this deck, I had put in some Catalyst Elementals, and I found that at the rate I was using my removal, it was much more efficient to have this 2-drop, so it's 1 mana less, and it's going to repeatedly give us value. It probably isn't going to get your dragons out any quicker, I've found, but you still get to do more things in a single turn, so you can cast your dragon, and you're still going to have enough mana to start burning your opponent's creatures and control their board. So I'm running 3 of those in the deck right now, but those could easily be swapped out for an extra dragon here or there. Now let's get into some of our non-creature spells. I'm constantly changing the numbers around here as the meta changes, but first we have 2 Dragon's Hoard, which will translate into so much card draw. I can't tap these things enough. I always have counters on them once they come out, and they curve pretty nicely into our dragons with higher CMC. We're going to see value with them right away when we're casting our Dragon's Eggs and unkicked Verix Bladewings, and late game with dragon tokens you can ensure that you're drawing into your burn spells and you're never going to have an empty hand. We're going to get even more value out of our Dragon cast with Spitflame. I'm running 1 to 2 of them right now, but could definitely see myself upping that number. It's great for when your opponents force you to discard or when you're looking to filter with Sarkhan because you're always going to be able to bring it back. You can spit flame your own Dragon's Egg and get it back immediately from the token entering. That's going to put gold counters on your Dragon's Hoard, that's going to give your opponents an unexpected threat, and that's going to give Sarkhan more protection if your opponent has a lot of flyers themselves. Because most arena matchups are best of one, I run 3 Fiery Cannonades to deal with merfolk, saprolings, and soldiers. It's very unlikely you're going to see Pirate Tribal, and even if you do, again, this will turn your Dragon's Egg into the token flyer, and that's going to get you card draw. So in paper, this could easily be a sideboard card. I personally still like it. There's been very few instances where I couldn't utilize it in some way. I run a couple Tormenting Voice in case of emergency. If I get a really bad hand, it's nice to discard those 2 cards, get 2 back, and try to straighten it out and filter through your deck. But it doesn't really need to be there. More often than not, it tends to be what I'm pitching with Sarkhan. And the rest of the deck is just your everyday collection of burn spells, Lava Coil, Shock, Shivan Fire, Banefire. Anywhere from 2 to 4 copies of any of them is fine. Throw the rest in the sideboard. I tend to favor Shivan Fire over Shock when I'm making cuts or siding things in because the deck isn't really about cheap, quick burns. It's more about it's a slightly longer game, so you want to control your opponent's board and give yourself more time to cast out those big dragons. Then you can get through and Fire Breathe. If you can't get through, you can always Banefire your opponent to the face and finish off the game. The land base, like I said before, is simple. You don't have to worry about color correction, so it's 23 mountains. I'll occasionally throw in a few detection towers just because I've struggled with my fair share of Carnage Tyrants, but really, I think it's best to keep as much red mana as possible for pumping those dragon tokens. So that's it for the deck. I'll put out some video of me playing some games at some point to show you it in action. I hope you like it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see me put out other decks in the future.